Hello, and welcome back to the Middling Along podcast. My guest today is Jo Moseley, who describes herself as a joy encourager, midlife adventurer, and beach cleaner. Jo came to stand up paddleboarding at the age of 51 and has built a reputation as a speaker, magazine contributor, and as host of the Joy of SUP, the Paddleboarding Sunshine Podcast. In 2019, she became the first woman to paddleboard coast to coast, raising funds for 2 Minute Beach Clean and the Wave Project along the way. The film about her journey, entitled Brave Enough, A Journey Home to Joy, has been shown at various festivals. She features in magazines and has also spoken at the Royal Geographical Society and at various Women's Institute events to try and get more women into paddleboarding. And her book, Stand Up Paddleboarding in Great Britain, about beautiful places to paddleboard, has just been released. Welcome along, Jo.
Thank you so much. I'm so honoured to be here. Thank you, Emma.
You are very, very welcome. So, first off, many congratulations on the book launch.
Thank you.
We'll come back to later if that's all right. We'll circle
Yeah.
back. But yeah, I have to admit to being more than a little bit selfish inviting you on the podcast. Like many others, I've been seduced by the images of people serenely paddleboarding in beautiful locations. The reality, however, when I tried it for the first time last summer was slightly different. I
Mhm.
drank a lot of seawater. And so I suppose I'm hoping that chatting to you will kind of help me overcome that voice in my head that tells me I'll never be any good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm wasting my time kind of getting back
Mm.
on a board. But yes, so that this is me being entirely selfish. But if you have if you run a podcast, then I think you're allowed to be a little bit selfish now
Absolutely.
and
It's
then.
up to you who you invite. So I'm very honoured to be here. Thank you.
So you talk on your website about a sort of a moment in time back in 2013 when you sort of had a bit of teary
Mm.
breakdown in the biscuit aisle of
Yeah.
Tesco's. What was why was that such a critical point for you, and kind of where did you go from there?
I think it wasn't the only time I've cried in a supermarket. I think I think we worked out that it's probably only Lidl and Sainsbury's, but I'm sure there must have been a Sainsbury's at some point. So yes, I was 48. I still am a single mum, but I was a single mum then, and the boys were sort of 13 and 16. So you know what that's like. You're
Mm.
just busy, busy, busy. Come home from work, put the tea on, and realize about 8 o'clock that you still haven't taken your coat off, like that. Both mum and dad were going through chemotherapy. Mum had lymphoma, and dad has had breast, bowel, and skin cancer. And it just was a moment. I'm sure everybody has been
Mm.
like this. You're after school and after work, and you're all just hangry. You're hungry, you're angry, everybody, and we were just going around Tesco supermarket. I just dropped my bags. We were in the biscuit aisle. I looked at the chocolate hobnobs, burst into tears, and thought, how did my life get to this? How did I get to be the person
Y-
that, the
You
woman
were
that
being well and truly sandwich generationed, weren't
yeah,
you?
absolutely, absolutely. And I thought it was stress. I thought it was being a single mum. I thought it was, both my parents were going through chemo. I
Mm.
hadn't it had not occurred to me that it had anything to do with the menopause. I thought the menopause happened like in your 60s and you had like elastic waistband trousers and maybe a fan. I just this was not something that happened to me. And one day I may well wear elastic waistband trousers. Don't get me wrong; I'm sure they're very, very comfortable. But it was like out there in in the distance, and I
Yeah.
thought it entailed hot flushes. I get cold flushes, so the hot. I was waiting for a hot flush, never happened. But it was insomnia, anxiety, itchy legs, tinnitus, twitchy eye, headaches, night sweats, heart palpitations. And I just put it down to being stressed. But I know for about 2 years, I thought I was getting flu. And I used to say to the boys, I think I'm getting flu. I've got a headache and I'm quite sweaty, like night sweaty,
Mm.
but I'm cold and shivery. So I'm going to go to bed early. And
You're
then the
like,
next
not
morning,
again.
yeah, and then the next morning I was fine. And I was like, oh, that was a quick 24-hour bug. I just kept thinking that I was getting 24-hour bugs for
Mm,
about 2 years. I didn't realize that it was shivery and cold flushes and headaches had anything to do with the menopause.
mm,
And so it all just came upon me. And I think that was the first time I recognized that there was something wrong and I needed to do something about it, that I was not coping. I think that was the point that I thought, I have to do something about this, but I don't know who to tell, because obviously mum and dad were both, you know,
mm.
very much involved in their own problems. And so I told a friend, and it was a bit like just sort of waving and saying, something's wrong here, and I don't know what to do. And I just felt like I just needed to just acknowledge it. And so I guess the reason is that I remember that moment was that it was the point at which you hit rock bottom and you think, I've got to do
Mm.
something about it. Whereas prior to that, every time I'd cried, every time I'd been upset, every time I'd flown off the handle because the boys got some paint on the carpet, I just brushed off. I just said,
You
it's,
rationalized it away,
yeah,
and
it's
yeah.
just, I'm busy. It was annoying. I'm stressed. I just at this point thought there is something wrong here. There's something more than just stress. I have no idea what it is, but I probably should just tell somebody, just to wave a little flag and say there's something wrong, and have you any ideas what it might be? And my friend gave me an indoor rowing machine and said, look, exercise might help. I don't think any of us thought, I don't think she mentioned the menopause at all. I think it was literally over the next couple of years on Twitter. I just started seeing things about it and thinking, oh, that might be what I've got. I've got the menopause. I didn't realize.
So you didn't go and sort of seek help from your GP at that point, or
No,
yeah,
because because I just wasn't joining the dots. I mean, now
yeah.
people say it's a taboo, but 8 years ago, very few people were talking about it.
Mm,
Very few people, and I was just piecing it together. And I didn't go to the GP because I grew up when all those reports many years ago were
mm,
associating HRT and breast cancer.
yeah.
I remember listening to them thinking, oh, I must remember that, when I get to
File it
that
away for
age.
later.
Yeah, but it was really lodged in my head. And so when I started to piece it together and said, this could be the menopause. I remember reading those lists and going, that's why I've got itchy legs. That's why my bones ache. That's why, I have this tinnitus. That's why even like my teeth felt different. And I suddenly just looked at this list and went, oh my gosh, that's me. Then I started to think it was the perimenopause. And then all those reports came to my head. And because my dad had had breast cancer, I wrongly
Mm,
went, oh, I can't possibly take HRT, breast cancer. So I just dismissed it, having absolutely no foundation of medical knowledge whatsoever. I self-diagnosed that I couldn't take it. Hands up, just said, oh no, I can't possibly, because I remember all those reports years ago saying I couldn't take, you couldn't take it if you had any history of breast cancer. So I self-diagnosed incorrectly and just sort of muddled along really, and found ways to look after myself
mm,
until we did some genetic testing, which was actually you're not as high a risk. You're not a really high up risk. You're higher, but you're not massively higher risk. And then I realized that actually HRT and those reports was wrong. But by that point, I'd sort of figured stuff out. Do you know what I mean? It all,
yeah, you kind of threw the worst. So
yeah,
how
I,
did
I think, yeah.
yeah. So
So yeah,
how did you get from the rowing machine to stand up paddleboarding? What was
so I did the rowing. When mum died, a year later, I did a massive rowing challenge, and we raised £10,000 with gift aid for Macmillan Cancer. I rowed, sorry, on my rowing machine 1,000,000 meters and 2
wow.
marathons. I did it because I just wanted to sleep. Literally, I mainly exercise for sleep, really, and joy and sleep and picking up later. And then I started going back to things I loved, like bodyboarding, hiking, swimming in the sea, snorkeling, that sort of thing, because I realized that exercise was making life a lot better.
Mm,
And then in 2016, I slipped injured my knee, and my spirits, having kind of got myself back together,
Mm.
my spirits just, were crushed again because I was in so much pain. September 2016, I thought, right, my knee's healing, and I'm going to set myself a challenge to do 30 minutes of exercise outside every day, mainly walking. And like you, I have been seduced by Instagram and paddleboarding pictures. And this 51-year-old mother was going to look like, the young women on Instagram. And I went for my first paddleboarding lesson, and I just remember standing up and thinking, this is extraordinary and I love it. And I don't know why I love it. I just felt so good. I felt really strong. I felt really confident. I felt like, I mean, don't get me wrong, I fell off and all that stuff. But
Oh,
the
good.
moments I did stand up, the moments I did stand up, I just felt like this was something really lovely. And I remember we went home, and the smile on my face, and I hadn't smiled for several months,
Mm.
like that, with the pain. And I just thought, wow, this is just so good. So it was not everybody, it isn't an immediate reaction for everybody, but for me, it was like, wow, I love it. I love it
Mm.
so much.
Did you spend some time getting some lessons and kind of getting into it that way, or?
So I'd had this first lesson, and there wasn't as many lesson availabilities as
Yeah.
there are now, very much less. So then I went and had another test with a chap where I went to buy my board, and then I just pretty much self-taught myself. If I was starting again, and as I've said in my book, I would always say to people, get a few lessons, get a course of lessons,
Mhm.
really get to grips with it. But it was different 6 years ago. There weren't as many opportunities, and there weren't as many opportunities locally, and I didn't take them if I didn't know where to go and things. So,
Yeah.
but I would always say now, take a taster, take a few lessons, really get to grips with that, the basics of, getting back on the board, and confidence and standing up. But I just basically went to the sea where my dad lives, and just sort of self-taught myself, trial and error, really. So yeah.
So, and how long did it kind of take you until you were sort of at the not falling in stage?
Quite quickly, because the North Sea is cold.
Very
So
motivating.
yeah, relatively quickly. And I paddle, I wouldn't go out in rough seas, and I paddle on the canal, which is pretty calm. And I had a good board. My first board was a good board, so I had that solidity and stability of the board. Yeah, I just loved it so much. Whatever was going to happen, I was going to keep doing it.
Yeah. But that's quite a big leap then from finding that as a kind of a joyful physical outlet to going, I'm going to paddleboard coast to coast. What?
Yeah, I have a way of stretching to these goals that just absolutely terrify me. They say never do any, what is it like, if it doesn't terrify you, it's not big enough, and all this. And I'm not like that, but I just do know that I set myself goals that then I freak and go, how and why am I setting myself this goal? And I hate myself for doing it. And then I do it, and then I'm like, oh yeah, cool. But I do set myself things that terrify me, but I don't do it intentionally. I don't have a plan to do that. I don't believe in this sort of go big, go home mentality, but I seem to do it to myself. And I really shouldn't, because it's too stressful. I just decided, yeah, a couple of months afterwards, that I wanted to paddleboard from Liverpool to Leeds. But I made a mistake in that I told a few people, and their response was, that sounds logistically complex, it sounds a bit boring, and it sounds too difficult for a woman of your age. And I was only 51. So instead of going, oh yeah, whatever, mate, and doing it, I listened to what they said, and I just thought, they're probably right, probably couldn't do it, probably is too difficult. Nobody seemed to want to help me, so I'll just put the dream away. So that's what I did for 3 years. Just put the
Ah,
dream away. So, but didn't put it away, but just put it in your
just on the
bottom
back
drawer.
burner. Yeah.
Yeah, back
And
burner.
and so yeah, so what was the impetus then for getting it back and dusting it off?
Two things. One was that my youngest son was going to university. So I've got two sons. My eldest son was doing his master's, yep, and my youngest son would be going to university in the October. So he was doing his A levels, and I just thought, I don't want to be that mum who is ringing up all the time saying, what you having for your tea?
When you're coming back to do your
When you're coming
washing.
back, do you want to do your washing? And I just thought Joey No Mates would be like that. um, and the other thing, more seriously, was that in the space of 6 months, I had lost 5 girlfriends, and they were from different areas of my life. It wasn't like suddenly the whole group kind of went, but and they were all really, really vibrant women, in very
Mm,
different women from different areas of my life, but vibrant, creative, interesting women who, when you met them in the street, you would be like, oh, I'm really glad I'm really glad I bumped into her today. And one I'd known since I was 17 and, was very close to, and she was incredibly artistic. And they all lived really creative, authentic, so to speak, lives. They were very much themselves. And it just made me realize that,
mm,
how short, precious life is. As I was reading your
absolutely.
website, the Mary Oliver, what do
Yeah.
you want to do with your one wild and precious life? And
Well, I totally sympathise. Yeah, I lost a good friend earlier this year, and it really does
it does.
stop you in your tracks. So I
It
can
does.
imagine losing, many, like
Yeah.
you say, in that short space
Yeah.
of time. It really does.
Yeah, and they weren't all my best friend by any means, but there were women I knew and women I admired and women that
Mm,
I was really glad if I bumped into them in the street or went out for coffee or whatever, and visited as a close friend. And it just made me think, if you have a dream, you should just give yourself the chance to try and achieve it. Just get yourself to the start line. Who knows whether you
yeah.
will, but just give yourself the chance. And so I thought, right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to pull that dream from 3 years ago back, and this time, instead of just going from Liverpool to Leeds, I'm going to go a bit further and go coast to coast along to
Mm.
Goole, so 162 miles. And I'm the sort of person that dithers, procrastinates, dithers, questions for you know 3 years, and then suddenly I make the decision, and then there's no turning back unless something really goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I just talk myself into something, like literally driving along in the car, going, "Yeah, no, yeah,
You could
yeah.
do
So
that.
my name's Jo Moseley, and I'm going to paddleboard," and I just talk myself into the idea that it's possible.
Presumably, you'd gotten quite a lot better over the 3 years as well and
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
more confident.
yes, I had, but I still had that thing in my mind of people saying, "I'm not sure you can do it," and nobody did say, "Oh, definitely, yeah, you can." Like my dad was a bit like, "Oh, what about the tunnels and what about this and what about that?" And nobody was like, "Yeah, Joe, we think you can do it." In fact, nobody said that. But but I started to believe that maybe I could, or maybe I just should give myself the chance to try,
Mm.
just try, just get to the start line. And then I did, and yeah, and I managed it. So I was very, very, very lucky.
And what were the circumstances that led to you working with the filmmaker to make the film of your
Instagram.
journey? Ah,
Instagram.
good
So
old Instagram.
It's a good old Instagram. So Instagram had got me into paddleboarding in the Lake District, not in Barbados or any, the Maldives, whatever. But I had put it out on my social media because I have this thing. If you put it out there, then you're probably not going to back out. Well, you still can, but if it was there on the screen, and then Frit just messaged and said, "Would you like a film?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, that's cool, that's great," thinking that Frit would be there for like a day, and it'd be like a
Mhm.
YouTube 2-minute film, and and it wouldn't be much, but it would be quite nice to put on my Instagram. This was before Reels, but I thought, that would be nice, and Frit would get
Something to
bored of
mark the
me.
occasion.
Yeah, just it would be lovely. It would be a nice little thing, and it turned into the film, and it turned into a great friendship, and yeah, it was way beyond anything I expected. It was serendipity really, and but I think it was just that whole thing when you put it out into the world. Sometimes stuff comes back that you don't expect. So yeah, we did it, and we made the film, and then we released the film last year, and now it's available to buy or rent, and it was an amazing experience. And the film's called Brave Enough: A Journey Home to Joy, and I think that it was just coming back to that joyfulness that I had over the years really lost. So
Mm.
yeah.
And did you did it on your 162 miles, were you joined at certain points by other paddleboarders?
No, because I just did not imagine. I know this makes me sound like a really sad person, but I just did not imagine anybody would want to join me. You know what I mean? It just sounds terrible, doesn't it? Sounds like I'm a really, and like there weren't as, remember 2019, not as many people
Mm.
paddleboarded. I mean,
It's kind of really taken off the last few
yeah,
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
the last 2 3 years it's really taken off. So not, I didn't see any other paddleboarder, at all, and I very rarely see paddleboarders on the canal now. I know there are a few more, but not as many. I mean, there weren't any then.
Mm.
So I just wanted to do it, and because I think I was so nervous that I might not do it, and so unsure of myself, I felt like if I committed to meeting other people that I would let them down.
Mm.
So I just sort of said, people would say, well, can I join you? Nobody asked to join me on a paddleboard, but people did ask to join walking along the towpath. And I was like, yeah, yeah, no, that'd be really nice if I get to that point.
Yeah.
If I make that point, you can join me. But I never made any major commitments, and I never asked anybody to sort of go out of their way because I just didn't want to let people down, because I still wasn't sure that I would do it. I just wanted to get to the start line, really.
Mm. And how did you manage the logistics? Did you rope
Well,
your
Flip
boys
had a,
in to
yeah, so I planned it out, and I'd worked out that I could get sounds really sad again, that I would get a taxi from the canal to my like little pub with rooms every day and go back. And then Frick joined me, and Frick was the filmmaker, and I had to make sure that filmmaking was the key, not logistical crew. But Frit had a van, and so we had some days with the van to travel backwards and forwards to the hotel. Which, pub with rooms, not a hotel,
Mm.
makes it sound smarter than it was. But and then in the middle, Frit had to go back to London. So then I asked the daughter of a friend of mine to pick me up. And so she picked me up, and I live in the middle bit of the Leeds Liverpool Canal. So she picked me up, took me home. I slept in my own bed. She picked me up in the morning, took me back to the same point. And so we just did it like that, because it would take me 8 hours to travel what it would take her half an hour to travel in the
Yeah.
car. It's crazy, crazy. And so we just did that for the middle bit, and then Frick came back, and then yeah, so it worked out really beautifully. But I do remember like ringing taxi services and saying, how much would it cost to collect me from the Leeds Liverpool
And they're
Canal and
like,
take me,
"What?"
and they were literally like, what? And I was like, and I'll have a paddleboard that I'll deflate. And they were like, what? So yeah, yeah, I just didn't think anybody would be interested in being with me, and I didn't want to let anybody down.
What did your boys think of your adventure before, during, and after?
It's quite interesting because before, so my youngest son Johnny and I used to go for walks whilst he was doing his A levels, and I would like try and talk about the adventure, and he's like, "Mum, A levels, A level revision." My other son Henry was doing his masters, and for both of them it was just not a big deal. It was like, yeah, whatever, mum. And then I made sure I did it when they were both doing other things. So they were both, Johnny was traveling post A level, and Henry was, I think he was doing a business course abroad. So I wanted them to know that I was able to create projects and adventures for myself
Mhm.
that did not rely upon them being part of it. It was trying to show them I would be okay. And I talk a lot about this in the film,
Yeah.
crying. I wanted them to know I was okay. And I do remember coming through Leeds, and we had a little WhatsApp group with my sister, and something had happened with Johnny in Europe. And he was talking, and the four of us were having this WhatsApp thing, and Henry was chipping in, and Johnny was chipping in, and my sister was chipping in, and I was standing there on my paddleboard, chipping in, on my WhatsApp. And then I suddenly looked up and thought, oh my gosh. And there's this sort of barricade thing on the water, barrier weary kind of thing on the water, which collects litter and then directs
Mm.
you through to the locks. And I suddenly looked up and went, oh my gosh, I've got to go. See you, bye. So, they weren't like, hey, mum, how's the paddleboarding? They were just like, I'm trying to sort this problem out on my trip to Europe. So, and then at the end, I said to them, I did it. And they were like, oh, that's really cool. that's nice.
Well
You give me
done.
some more data for my phone, you know. And actually, that was good. You know, I just wanted it to be a very normal thing for them, that I would be okay. I just wanted them to take it in their stride. I didn't want to be the mother that they worried about, because they had genuinely seen me going through the menopause and had seen me,
Mm.
you know, crushed and broken and crying and, you know, just going right off the handle when something went wrong and, you know, where are my
Mm.
car keys and bursting into tears. So they'd seen all that. And I kind of wanted them just to know it was all going to be okay.
Yeah. It was after your kind of coast to coast that you started up your own podcast.
Yeah, so I started my podcast in December 2020. So Johnny had come home for the first lockdown, and then he was like, "Mum, no way am I staying here for second lockdown." You know, he was at uni, he wanted that uni life. And so I was in my second lockdown, and I just thought, you know, podcasts have become really like friends to me, you know, listening to
Mm.
other podcasts, you know, it's just lovely, isn't it? You feel like I listen to sort of two to three genres of podcasts. I listen to adventure podcasts and I listen to midlife podcasts, and they each offer something where I feel like I'm not alone. And I felt pretty lonely in lockdown, if I admit it, really.
Yeah.
So I thought, how do you feel not lonely in lockdown? Oh, you start a podcast. I mean, I could have just read books, you know what I mean, or watched films. But I thought, oh, I'll start a podcast about
You
paddleboarding.
like a challenge. I think we figured
Yeah, I
that
know.
out.
But it's just a bit like, oh God, Joe. But because I'd got the commission to write the book, I also knew that the podcast would help me make contacts and I could
Oh,
ask people
okay.
about
Yeah.
places. So there
So it
was
was a
two,
good
yeah,
kind of intertwine the
yeah,
two.
that they would all work together really. So I started the podcast on Christmas Eve. I went on all these forums and said, should I launch my podcast on Christmas Eve? And resounding answer was absolutely not. You know, that's the stupidest thing you should ever do.
But you did it anyway.
But I did it anyway. And I found that people were at home. You know, people were at home,
Mm.
and particularly after Christmas and before New Year, people were at home, and I think we were allowed to do like one little day's travel to see my dad, but generally most people were at home, and
Mm.
so people started listening. I mean, I got an amazing guest for my first one, and people started listening. So I thought, oh, I'll try another one. So yeah,
You got hooked.
yeah.
Tell us a bit more about the book. So I hadn't realised that you were already sort of thinking about gestating the book whilst you were doing the podcast. How did you? Well, I'm quite interested. How did you pitch the idea of the book? How did you find that process?
Yeah, it's funny because I have literally just written a blog today for an adventure magazine about it,
Hmm.
and I sent it to my editor just so she could just check it, and she's like, "Yes, it's you really showed how hard it was for you." I really laid it on the line.
Yeah, we don't want everyone sending us their book
Yeah,
proposals. Thanks
literally,
very
yeah,
much.
you have
We'll
really
be
laid how hard it
inundated.
was. So I pitched it in the summer of 2020, and I had pitched some books, another book idea like 2 to 3 years before, more of a midlifey one.
Mhm.
And they were like, it wasn't this publisher, but other publishers were like, we don't want to go with the idea, but you've obviously got quite a nice style. They were really, I really remember they were both editors that said no, but said it in such an encouraging way that they didn't crush me. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
always remember that. I'm always incredibly grateful that they didn't crush me and say, yeah, no, you're just rubbish. They just said, no, it doesn't work for us. We've got some other midlife books coming out, which actually was one of my friends in the end, but I didn't know she was writing it. But try again, try again with
Yeah, don't
something.
give up.
Don't give up. Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. So I pitched the idea, and one was like, no, because we're writing another paddleboarding book. I was like, oh my God, I'm always just late to the party. And then I pitched it to the adventure publishers, and they were like, not quite the one that you want to do, but what about this? So we kind of worked it out, and I said, yeah, I could definitely do that. I could definitely write a guidebook. And then I went, I don't know how to do this. So we refined it, and then I thought, right, well, definitely after Christmas, I can start traveling. And then we went into lockdown 3.
Mm.
And I'll be honest, Emma, my levels of self-belief were just slipping away. I don't know how anyone else found it in lockdown, but
Mm.
first lockdown, weather was nice. Johnny was home, working from home, live in a village. We got our food. I shopped once a week. I felt relatively safe. It was okay. I was actually quite terrified by getting
Mm.
COVID, but other things around it felt okay. But then lockdown 2 and 3, Johnny had gone back to uni. My dad was my bubble, but he was 2.5 hours away, and he was like, "I don't think you should come. It's a long way," and all that stuff. And
Mm.
then
And
once the
everyone's resilience by that point was
yeah,
totally had a battering.
yeah, and by that point, my self belief was just slipping away. My confidence was slipping away. I just was like, why have I said that I'll write this book? And then when I couldn't travel in lockdown 3, I was just like, oh my gosh. So I launched the podcast and we launched the film, and that gave me a lifeline. It
Mm.
gave me a lifeline to other people. It gave me a reason to talk to people. It gave me a reason to look at the camera, to brush my hair. Um, I was with Frit, and we were, I'd work on my job, and then Frit and I would work on the film. So it was just my lifeline. And then I started traveling in the May. My first trip went to Liverpool, and then I went to London. And then I just thought, you just have to just keep believing that you can do this book, and keep talking to people. And
Mm.
just like with everything else, just take the next step, just take the next step, just take the next step. And then I just got into it.
And how did you so how many routes do you cover in the book, and how did you choose them?
Yeah, so good question. So there are 32 chapters in the book. 2 chapters I already knew. So one element was a section of the Leeds Liverpool Canal, which is obviously like just such a joy to me. And another is a little village near Whitby where my dad lives, which is where I really learned to be a paddleboarder. So those two I had sussed. I knew those two. And then it was a case of, I bought this massive map and I put it in the kitchen, and I just looked at it and thought, right, I want to have a geographical spread.
Yeah.
I don't want all coastal. I want inland. So I want one right in the middle of London, so I can talk about paddleboarding in the middle of London on Regent's Canal. I
Mhm.
want some more inland city ones like Liverpool and Bristol and Exeter and Nottingham. And I want canals and rivers and lochs and lakes and estuaries and rivers and salt marshes and docks and the coast. And so I just did this, and then I kept moving bits around, looking at my research, talking to people. And then I just sort of went, right, I think I'm just about sorted.
Got a
Um,
structure.
and just hoped for the best. And people were just so lovely. So I would talk to some people and say, right, where I don't know Cornwall, tell me where to go in Cornwall. And they would say, well, you probably don't want to go to this area because it's more for surfing or sup surfing. And
Mhm.
so you want to go to, rather than the North Coast, you want to go to the South. And so I just asked people all the time. I asked people on my podcast. I asked everybody. I spent hours just talking to people and saying, what do you think? What do you think? And then I just kind of went, right. And I trusted the people that were saying to me, you should come here. I rang one author, a lovely chap in Scotland who'd written a book about paddleboarding in Scotland. And I just said, and he said, right, let me go through it with you. He just shared it with me. He just said, I think you
Mm.
should go here, here, and here. And my criteria was that it were places that could absorb the traffic. So there would be car parking, or you could get there by train. I wanted to try
Mhm.
and do stuff with sort of neutral, so to speak, transport, so that public transport could be used. I didn't manage that in Scotland, but I did in England. I didn't want places that we would disturb the community if there was too many cars. So I had all these criteria. And Matt was amazing. He was absolutely amazing, and just taught me through bits of Scotland. Everybody was amazing. And then I just went out on a limb on a couple of places that other people were a bit like, really? But actually they
Loving
turned
it.
out to be stunning. Yeah, every
Amazing.
place was amazing. We had, you know, thunderstorms, flash floods, not hurricane, but winds that were just off the scale. They caused a bit of a challenge, but it was an amazing opportunity. When I think back, I just was just wish I hadn't doubted myself quite as much as I did, but
Yeah. So is there going to be a Jo Moseley challenge where you see how many people can complete the full
it's
bingo card?
yeah, it's really funny because you should say that because somebody wrote an Amazon review saying we went on a Joe Sup chat adventure, which was really sweet. And then a couple of people who joined me in the book have been asked to sign people's copies of the book. So
Oh,
they're being
lovely.
asked to sign copies, which is just really lovely. She's just somebody asked me to sign a copy, and I was like, oh, that's so cute. So I'm very pro the paddleboarding industry, the professional paddleboarders. So in each one I recommended people to go with. So I was very much of that opinion that if you don't know because it is aimed at new to experienced, but it's not aimed at super experienced,
Hmm.
but they might get ideas. So I recommended people all along, and I went with a mutual friend of ours from social media, Sarah Blues, who is called the Plus Size Paddler, who encourages women of all sizes and shapes and abilities to get into paddleboarding. She's super inspirational. And we had a great paddleboard in Studland Bay. We had to get up at 5 to get on the water and then off the water before the wind. But yeah, I met so many wonderful people and saw so many wonderful things. So yeah, sometimes I look at it and think, God,
Did I
how
really
did that
do that?
happen? Yeah.
So what's the next challenge, dare I ask? Or are you having a break?
So I'm just doing another book, a tips book. And then I do genuinely, I don't know about you, and you know, don't get me wrong, my work was not frontline. I was not a nurse or a doctor or, working in a supermarket. I was not frontline, but I do feel like the pandemic and writing the book, I just feel not, I wouldn't say I'm burnt out, but I just do need a bit of a
Yeah.
nap, you know. Um,
I think
yeah,
this
just to
you've
catch up with,
definitely well-earned rest
yes,
at
yeah,
least after all those exertions.
just take it easy for a little bit and then, have other dreams. But yeah, I would like to, I don't know, just see my friends a bit more. When you're writing a book, you can get really boring and just
To
really
get your head
focus.
down. Yeah.
Yeah, and just sort of see my friends and just have a bit of a
Bit of a
more
breather.
normal life.
I feel like we could carry on talking all day, but
Yes, I'm sorry I have
but
gone
no,
on a bit.
no, not at all. It's great. I love it. But maybe as a sort of a closing kind of bookend for me as a sort of a one-time attempt to and hopefully I'll get another chance later this summer. But do you have any good tips for absolute beginners?
Have a lesson and get a lesson and go with somebody that will teach you. As you stand up, make sure you keep your head up, look to the horizon, don't look down. Your head's a really heavy part of your body, and so the more you look down, the more
Oh,
likely you're
okay.
going to wobble.
You
So
follow the
keep
head
your
and fall
yeah,
in.
yeah. And somebody once said to me, you don't drive with your head down, so don't paddle with your head down. So
Good
keep your
tip.
head to the horizon, keep a relaxed body, keep your knees relaxed rather than locked in, and
Mm.
try not to grip your
The
toes. It's so
panic. I
easy
think I
to
think that was
panic.
partly my problem is just
Yeah,
like
you're
panic.
panicking. Yeah,
See.
it happens to me. When the waves are a bit bigger, suddenly my toes grip as well.
Mm.
And just enjoy it. Just keep breathe and just enjoy it. But know that there is a saying: if you're not getting wetter, you're not getting better. That's the saying in paddleboarding. But just keep enjoying it. I think if you're enjoying it, but a good instructor will be able to help you sort of find your way up. And there's different ways. You don't just have to do it one way. There are different permutations. So
Yeah. Okay.
just try different ways and try different ways of getting back on the board. It's not all just one technique. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's the other thing I really struggled with is having rubbish kind of upper body strength and just
Yeah. So if were you trying to get onto the board coming at it from the side?
I think so, yeah.
Because a way that Sarah does is
To go
going to
from
the
the full
back,
end. Yeah.
yeah, going to the tail, and then she uses a stirrup to help, but just pulling yourself that way, and that's a good way too. And once you can do that, I think it adds a sense of confidence because you know that if you fall off, you can get back on.
Yeah.
that you then have the confidence just in your body. But a lot of it is just believing that you can do it, just talking to yourself and saying, I can do this, I can
And
do this, I can do
perseverance.
this. And where did you try it?
Oh gosh, well, I probably made a big mistake of having my one and only lesson in the sea, I think
Yeah.
off Tenby. So
Oh,
it was a
okay,
little
lovely.
bit choppy. And I
Yeah.
think, if I'd done it on a completely flat sort
Yeah,
of
maybe a
sheltered,
lake or wherever,
yeah.
something.
So I'm gonna revisit it. I will have another
Yeah,
go.
it's too lovely not to try again. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
too lovely a thing not to try. And yeah, and I hope that a lot of the people that I paddleboarded with, their stories will be really inspiring from the book. It was really important to me that I had these really lovely people in there.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to reading it. I've ordered it this
Oh, thank
morning, and
you.
I'm hoping it will help also give me that nudge to keep at it
Yeah.
until I'm not getting wetter, just better.
Yeah, till you're just getting better. Yeah, it does take practice, but just keep believing that you can do it.
Well, Joe, you're a massive inspiration, and thanks so
Oh,
much for sharing your story. And
oh, thank you.
yeah, whether people listening are paddleboarders or would-be paddleboarders or none of the above, then I'm
Yeah,
sure your story resonates with them.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah,
I hope it's just, you just have to be brave enough to keep taking that next step, but also don't self-diagnose yourself. Do get proper professional
do
advice.
do go to your GP, dear
Yeah,
listeners.
do take proper advice rather than self-diagnosing yourself on the basis of absolutely no knowledge whatsoever. Yeah, if it was a different time, I might have taken a different decision. So,
Well, thanks again, Joe, for coming
my
on
pleasure.
and
Thank
chatting to
you.
us. You've been listening to the Middling Along podcast. Do remember to subscribe to be notified when our next episode is live. And why not visit the blog at www.middlingalong.com to sign up to my newsletter as well. I do hope you enjoyed listening today. If you did, I'd be really grateful if you would consider leaving a short review, as that helps people find the podcast and helps get it noticed. Hope you can join us next time. Goodbye for now.